Welcome to the Regulation Podcast from the Institute of Regulation. My name is Marcy Albu, Chair of the Institute and a regulator myself. On this month's podcast, I'm delighted to welcome two senior colleagues from the UK's Information Commissioner's Office to discuss the complexities of information and data regulation. Unlike the many regulators who focus on a sector or a profession, the ICO is one of a few regulators who regulate a specific issue across the whole economy. In their case, that's data privacy and data protection, upholding information rights in the public interest. And this at a time when over 400 million terabytes of data are uploaded onto the internet every day. That's about 200 billion hours of video every single day. So to help us understand how on earth they do that, we have Emily Keeney, the ICO's Deputy Commissioner of Regulatory Policy. Emily oversees the ICO's policy work, including on legislation, economic analysis and research, and on issues including children's privacy. Emily previously worked at Ofcom, among many other policy roles. Welcome, Emily.
Thank you very much. Lovely to be here.
Thanks for joining us. And we also welcome Angela Balakrishnan, the ICO's Executive Director for Strategic Communications and Public Affairs. Angela's job is to gather insight from stakeholders and promote awareness of information rights and the ICO's regulatory approach. And before joining the ICO, Angela spent 9 years in government communications and has experience in charities and journalism too. Good comms are really essential for regulators, and we've done a podcast on that very topic, so it's great to have you here too, Ange.
Thank you for having us.
Lovely. Well, thanks to you both. And I introduced the ICO very briefly at the beginning, but can you tell us in your own words what the ICO does as a regulator and why it's important? Emily, let's start with you.
Yeah, absolutely. So we're here to make sure that people are able to have trust and confidence in how their information is being used, that organisations feel really confident about being able to use that information, to innovate with it in ways that benefit all of us. And actually, we're also, we don't just regulate data protection. We also have a range of other responsibilities, including freedom of information. So we make sure that all of us are able to access public information that is critical to an accountable society and government. And we also have responsibilities under NIS, which is about ensuring the safety of the information in our critical national infrastructure.
And sorry, did you say NIS?
Yes, NIS. It's kind of cyber regulation. And so that plays into that thing about keeping our personal information safe and secure.
Okay, right. That's a great start. So we've already got a little issue there to discuss about the interface between protection of information and access to it. But Ange, coming to you, just anything you want to add about the ICO's role, just building on what Emily said?
I mean, Emily's summarised our vast role very succinctly. I think the thing I would say is people hear the words data protection and probably immediately think about sort of very technical compliance and processes and systems. And I think what we fundamentally believe is that these rights are about people. And it's, people's data, which means people's kind of lives, their stories, their relationships, their dignity is at the heart of what we do. And we really do try and bring it back to the kind of that real life impact on real people in the real world.
Okay, well, that's obviously absolutely essential and great to hear. Before we come on to some of the detail behind what you're doing, let me just ask you, Ange, about communication, because communicating what you do is clearly important, both to people, as you've said, but also to the companies and public bodies that need to comply with the law. So how do you go about doing that?
Yeah, so as Emily said, one of our kind of common goals is to help people understand their privacy and freedom of information rights. But more than that, I think the work that the comms and public affairs team try to do is to get people to actually care so that they can take steps to protect their information and to see why these rights and the work that we do as a regulator is so important. And I think over the last few years, we've really tried to use our comms and engagement as a regulatory tool or lever in its own right. If we can help people and if we can help organisations to think and to do things differently as a result of our comms and engagement work, then we can influence behaviours that help protect and promote people's data better. I would say fundamental to our approach is really trying to take that human approach to our work. So I mentioned, trying to make sure that we're bringing it back to people. That means telling emotive stories, turning the kind of data and insights that we have into creative content, understanding what people do actually care about and how we can seed our work into the things that they care about, that are front of their minds, so that we're making our work more relevant, more connected with different audiences, so that we can actually deliver that real world social change.
That's really great. I'm going to come on to you, Emily, in a moment about these different audiences that you've got. But I'm just interested, Ange, in how you get people to care about regulation. And you talked about emotive stories. So can you just briefly give us one little emotive story that's cut through?
Absolutely. Gosh, let me think. There's so many. So a really powerful campaign that we ran recently was called The Ripple Effect. And it was all about people who are often in vulnerable situations and the impact that they have when they experience a data breach. Now, people think of the words data breach and again, probably think of systems, processes going wrong. And that was the insight that we sort of acted on. Lots of people that we were supporting often came to us saying that organizations really failed to understand the impact, the life-changing impact that these admin errors, and that's how they were being described, email that was incorrectly sent, a slip of paperwork, these admin errors were really having on people's lives. And it was trying to sort of flip that and focus on the impact to try and get people to think differently about how they were going about some of their work to protect people's information. And it really did have quite a profound impact. I think 2/3 of the organizations that we worked with as a result of this campaign said that they were thinking differently about their practices and actually enacting different practices, because I think the realization dawned that
they got the message.
It wasn't just a slip of a paper or an error. It was it really was changing people's lives quite significantly.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I mean, as everybody listening will know, I mean, it's our own data, our own personal information, which we want to keep private often. So, Emily, coming back to you. The different audiences that the ICO has, obviously, as I said earlier on, you work across the whole economy, public bodies, companies, individuals. Those interests conflict sometimes. How do you balance their needs and particularly those people who hold the information and those people whose information it is? How do you do that?
Yeah, and I think, as you said at the beginning, we are relatively unusual for a regulator in that we cover the whole of the economy, and actually we cover both the public and the private sector. We don't have one specific set of stakeholders or one particular sector that we cover. So we need to think about multiple interests and understand multiple perspectives and balance those. I mean, actually, that generally is what regulation is always about. It's always about understanding that you are trying to deal with an issue where there will be different incentives, people will be seeking different outcomes. But when you've got such a vast landscape of stakeholders, that can be particularly complex. We do it in lots of different ways. So when we are thinking about a particular policy position or a particular regulatory intervention, we will often consult. And we will try and do that in a quite proactive way so that we are really making sure that we're reaching out and making people aware that that consultation is happening. But we also recognise that that's only ever going to get a small proportion of your stakeholders. So we also are increasingly doing research, whether that's research with the public, and sometimes that's qualitative research, which is fantastic for not necessarily giving you the kind of X% of the population think this, but really digging under the skin of what's driving people, what they feel and think and worry about. We also do quantitative research, and we also do research with businesses as well, because that will generally give you a more varied and representative understanding of the perceptions and experiences of different kinds of businesses, particularly small businesses who are just less likely and less well equipped to respond to formal consultations. We also do a lot of getting out and about, kind of, talking to people, whether that's talking to parliamentarians, to civil servants about their policy ambitions and direction, whether it's talking to other kind of stakeholders in the sector, civil society groups. And we have a policy methodology kind of framework, which helps people think about how do you bring all of that evidence and analysis and insight together, weigh it up in different ways. How do you set that against things like your economic analysis, your legal advice, your legal insight, in a way that helps you understand broadly what it is that we're trying to achieve, what is the difference that we're trying to make to the world here, what are the interventions that we have available to us as a regulator, and how do we take into account all of the different perspectives as we start to think about how we act in that area.
So you gather all of this information from all of these stakeholders, masses. I led another regulator which is also cutting across the economy in the same way, which is the Equality and Human Rights Commission. There are very few, as I say, the ICO, the EHRC, Health and Safety Executive, and the key question is how to prioritise. So you gather all of this information and you could do any number of different things. So how do you pick the most important things to do?
I think the first thing, and this can be really hard sometimes, but is just recognising that we can't do everything, and helping our own staff to understand that, helping our stakeholders, helping make sure that, we are communicating that we are choosing a particular number of things and we're not going to be able to do everything. You then have to think about where are we as a regulator best placed to act. It is quite a complex regulatory environment, and we work closely with other regulators, including some of the ones you've just mentioned, also with other regulators in the Digital Regulation Cooperation Forum, so Ofcom, CMA, the FCA, and sometimes they will be better placed to act than us.
Yeah.
And we also have ways of thinking about where are the potential harms to people or to businesses the greatest, and actually where are there the greatest opportunities? Because I think the harm element is really important. We want to intervene in places where we know that the public have concerns. We know that actually the potential impact if the use of that personal data goes wrong can be really, really massive.
Yeah.
But we also recognise that data, that personal information has the power to really transform our economy, our society for the better. So we also don't just think about where can we act to prevent the greatest harm. We also try and think about where are there opportunities where us intervening, us providing advice or support actually could kind of really enable some of that innovation for public good.
I think a big part of managing the vast range of stakeholders that we have and the tough choices that Emily's described is being able to explain why and how we've reached a decision or landed on a certain approach. And I think that's something that we've been very conscious of doing more deliberately, explaining the why, because we might not always appease all our different stakeholders and audiences, but at least if we can make the effort to explain our thinking, we might have a hope of sort of bringing them on side or at least getting them to understand where we've come from.
That's really interesting, Ange. Thanks both of you for that. So just on that, Ange, you've talked about how sometimes people might take time to come around or maybe not even come around at all. So I know that this is an issue for all regulators because people tend not to like their regulator for some reason. But what do you do when people complain about the fact that they're regulated for about their information? They need to pay you, they get fined, or they get ticked off for not responding to subject access requests or freedom of information in a timely way, etc., etc. How do you turn them around? How do you get people, if not to like you, to respect you at least?
I think being able to be credible in terms of our evidence goes a long way. But I think it is being able to have that dialogue as well. And sometimes there are difficult conversations to have, but that's part of the approach to to help engage those kind of challenging customers or stakeholders. So going in and knowing that you might not get them on side, but at least having the conversation in the first instance goes a big part of the way, because it shows that you're open to listening to their perspective, and you can sort of have that empathy by listening. I think having the evidence to show why we've reached a decision or where we're coming from can help build credibility to the case that we're making. But I think sometimes, it is being comfortable with the fact that we might not always see eye to eye, and that is okay if we feel confident that we are, doing the best thing in terms of our approach as a regulator, and have a clear sight of the impact that we're trying to achieve, and we can then articulate that impact.
That's fantastic. Okay, brilliant. Now I'm going to move on to another topic which all regulators are grappling with, and I'm sure this is right front and centre for you as well, because the world's changing at phenomenal speed with new tech developments, including AI, obviously, and the fact that so much data about us is held outside our jurisdiction or on the cloud in places that we don't even know where it is. So, Emily, what does this mean for the future of information regulation?
I think it's quite challenging, both in terms of the speed at which it's moving and the requirement for us to be thinking not just domestically, but internationally. Actually, we do an awful lot of work with other regulators internationally, both other data protection authorities, but also other regulators, including there is an international equivalent of the DRCF, for instance, and we engage with them as well. We also, so some of that is about sharing information, sharing intelligence, sharing kind of coming to agreed policy positions. Some of it, though, is also about joint enforcement, and that can be a really powerful tool. So we recently took action jointly with Canada against 23andMe, for instance. That can be quite time consuming because you have to align slightly different powers, slightly different legislative frameworks, but it really can send an important message that organizations, even when they're operating in different jurisdictions, have to take note of the legal frameworks in all of those jurisdictions. And also, I think just that ability to work with other regulators internationally to understand what are their priorities, what are they tackling, and sometimes that helps with the prioritization discussion that we were just having, because it's not just that there might be other regulators domestically who may be better placed, but if you know that another regulator in another country is tackling a big issue and they're taking action on something, it might be that we focus our attention elsewhere, and that means that the issue's getting addressed, but we're not duplicating effort. So all of that work with our international colleagues, I think, is really critical. We also do quite a lot of work in terms of that fast-moving landscape to try and understand the emerging technology, what's going to hit us down the road. We do kind of horizon scanning reports. We do some of that jointly with other regulators as well. And a lot of the conversations internationally are about where are we as regulators going to need to focus next. So that also helps us manage this very fast-moving landscape.
That's really good. And obviously, I'm a great believer in developing this kind of regulatory net where regulators work with each other to combine their shared statutory remits, as you say, as well as their focus, sector regulators working with the ICO to protect data in a particular sector. And the example that you used there of 23andMe, which is an organization that held people's DNA data, which you can't get much more personal than that. I think it's a really great example of the way the ICO is protecting. It comes back to the point Angie made earlier on about people. So, and anything you want to add, Ange, to the challenges and how the ICO is raising its game to meet them?
Internationally or just more broadly?
Well, the tech challenges and internationally. I mean, obviously the operating environment around the ICO is moving very fast. how are you able to stay agile?
I think there's this need to really be able to articulate our impact. I think especially at the moment when the tech is moving very fast and there is perhaps a narrative that regulation is a blocker or a barrier, trying to really show that we are supporting innovation and supporting growth, but not just kind of saying that as kind of rhetoric, having proof points that can demonstrate how we have worked with different organizations to help support really responsible and innovative uses of people's data. And we've got lots of great examples of that. Our economic analysis team have recently done a really great piece of work to actually quantify the impact that we are delivering to UK businesses. And that's through a range of our guidance, our products, our services, the tools that we have on our website. Is actually delivering millions of pounds in value for UK businesses. And I think that's a really powerful impact to be able to articulate why we're relevant, how we're staying agile.
That's great. And Emily, what are the challenges is the ICO facing at the moment?
Well, I think there is always the challenge of it, particularly given the breadth of our regulatory remit, of working out where we focus, where we have the greatest impact, and how we kind of deliver against that in a context where we've got lots of stakeholders and lots of competing demands.
Yeah.
There's also, I think, continues to be a challenge for us in terms of, and this is something I think lots of regulators think about, around how we've got a whole range of tools in our toolkit. We often have stakeholders who really want us to go in hard with the stick, to use our fining powers, to use our enforcement powers. Those can be some of the most time-consuming, some of the most expensive powers to use. And the evidence shows actually that whilst they can have a real impact, they are not always the best way of shifting wider market behaviour or of delivering kind of change beyond that individual organisation. So I think building the understanding for an approach which is much more nuanced and where we use the whole range of our regulatory tools in order to affect the greatest change, and really being able to demonstrate the impact that those kinds of more nuanced approaches has had in a context in which we are never, I think, going to get away from a demand for that big stick use, I think continues to be a challenge. How do you manage that and evidence it? I mean, you've touched already on some of the challenges in terms of the technology is evolving so fast, and we do need to be able to have the skills to understand the implications of that for how our personal information is used. I suppose the counter to that I would say is we absolutely need to be keeping up with that technology, and we need to be understanding sort of how we influence as that is deployed, as opposed to trying to come in afterwards. But also, so much of what we still see is really about the basics. If you look at some of the sort of cyber breaches, for instance, so many of those are still about really, they are not sophisticated. They are still about really simple, basic things that people are not doing to stay protected. And similarly, lots of the issues that we get in through complaints are around things like access to information rights, subject access requests. So I suppose I would add to the keeping up challenge is balancing the need to do those kind of basics well and get organisations to do those basics well, with also understanding the new and the emerging and the most complex.
Yeah.
And then I think the one other thing that is continuing to be a challenge for us is the volumes, the continued growth in volumes that we are seeing in areas like our complaints handling functions and our FOI functions. And I think we really need to keep thinking about how we use the technology ourselves to make sure that we are dealing with those volumes in ways that both make sure that the people who are coming to us get a really good experience, but also in a way that is as efficient and effective use of public money and the kind of fees that businesses pay us as possible.
Yeah.
And that, that's something that I think lots of organisations are grappling with.
Absolutely. Well, lots of important messages in there. Get the basics right. I mean, this is obviously applies to regulators too, because they handle data and lots of it. So get the basics right. Collaborate with others on the higher end stuff. Understand the tech, and make sure that you're using AI yourself to manage data effectively as well. And the other thing you said earlier on about the range of tools, again, that applies to all regulators. All regulators have hard tools of, taking legal action, fining, as well as the softer approaches of communications to persuade people to comply because that's what they want to do. So we're nearing the end now. Ange, coming back to you, for people listening to the podcast and concerned about their own information, protecting themselves, and people who are working in regulators who want to make sure that their regulator is doing the right thing, what would you recommend?
I mean, the ICO has a whole host of really great tools, information. So I would say, come and see us. Our website has lots that can help you, whether you're an organisation or an individual looking to access your rights or exercise your rights. We also do have our helpline, which is great if you want to speak to someone, and we've had really great feedback about the help provided via that service. I think, as Emily has said, people do seem to exercise their rights, especially relating to their subject access requests, and it's about making people aware that they have that right that they can exercise. And despite the volumes of complaints, I mean, you can raise concerns with the ICO, and we do respond to a vast volume of those complaints. So I would say those are the kind of three things.
Fantastic. Well, I'll give a little plug to your website in a moment, because absolutely people should go there and check out for themselves what they need to do to protect themselves, as well as to make sure that their own organisations, regulators, are doing the right thing as well. But Emily, coming back to you, maybe for some final hints and tips that you would give other regulators who want to improve their own organisation, their own regulatory practice, drawing on your experience there at the ICO, and obviously what a professional body like the Institute of Regulation can do to help staff in regulators such as the ICO.
That's a tricky one. I think the things that I would say are really think about who you are there to deliver for, and understand what it is that they want and need from you. And I think one thing to remember, particularly for regulators for whom they are there in some way to deliver to the public, is that you are not, as somebody working in a regulator, you are probably not representative of the way in which most of the public will think about or experience those issues. So you need to make sure you're really putting yourself in the shoes of the people that you're there to deliver for. And that's absolutely crucial, because it will mean that you think about the problems you're trying to solve in a different way. That's often true, actually, for regulators who are delivering to businesses rather than the public too, is they will be thinking about those issues in ways that are different to you, and their motivations will be different, and they may just, respond quite differently to how you would. So really understanding that you are unlikely to be representative. You are an expert, and that kind of takes you out of that. Thinking about that whole range of tools that you have available to you and how you best deploy them. And also thinking about how you get your staff and the people who work for you both in that mindset where they're thinking about it from an outside-in perspective. And ideally, I think, not working in silos, that really helps to manage some of those things around what's the best tool that we can use? How do we work together to solve this problem? That's something that we've been working really hard on here at the ICO. And then I think just talking to other regulators, organisations like you, are really helpful, because there's so much that we can learn from each other. You know, the kind of things that we're regulating are different, but so many of the problems and the solutions are the same.
Fantastic. Okay, that's brilliant. We're at time now, and I'm really grateful for those hints and tips. You're absolutely right. Talking to other regulators is really, really helpful, because we all basically do the same thing. And we all think about the users, whoever we're regulating on behalf of, whether it's citizens or service users or businesses. We're working all in a complex legal, political and economic environment, and we all care about balancing protection with enabling growth and innovation. So thank you very much, both of you. That's Emily Keeney and Angela Balakrishnan of the Information Commissioner's Office. It's great to hear about your work. I said I'd plug your website. It's ico.org.uk. Please, everyone, check out how you can keep your own information safe, as well as improve the information government's data protection in your own organisation. Thanks also to our sound engineer, Neil Bowerman of Bowerman Audio Productions. And if those of you who've been listening to this podcast have found it interesting, please tell your colleagues and tune into future episodes where we will talk about more issues of interest to regulators. That's all from me, Marcy Albu from the Institute of Regulation. There's more material on our website, ioregulation.org. So for now, good luck with your own regulatory challenges. Stay in touch with each other, talk to other regulators, and we can all help UK regulation become the best it can. Thank you very much. Goodbye.